It wasn't until the phone rang that I started to trust her. Not until I heard my dad's trembling voice say, "Please don't hang up, honey. I believe I'm going to die." The words caused my stomach to drop, my knees to weaken, and every memory I had attempted to bury to resurface. The woman's warning struck me like a chilly hand on the back of my neck at that very time. Something is going to happen in 3 days. 3 days. Precisely 3 days. I recall feeling the world tilt as I stared at my ringing phone in my base quarters. It had been 8 years since my father had given me a call. Not since the evening he declared me dead to him for enlisting rather than accepting the peaceful, secure desk job he desired. Navy SEALs were a risky choice for a girl, but not since he assured me that Marines were okay. 8 years of pride, 8 years of silence, and 8 years of acting as though nothing hurt. He was now phoning me to tell me that he might be dying. Everything changed at that point. Perhaps I should explain how it all started though. The canteen, the most commonplace location you could think of, was where it all began. I was working on my after-action report by myself at a corner table with my laptop open. Coffee grinds, disinfecting wipes, and the subtle metallic smell of the gym 2 doors down were all present in the canteen. A news channel was muted on a TV in the corner. Plates and forks clinked. There was a gentle murmur as conversations overlapped. It was one of those quiet moments in between training blocks that seems nearly normal and ordinary. She then took a seat. No hesitanki, no introduction. A woman in her early 60s wore a basic beige cardigan, a civilian access badge fastened to her collar, and her gray hair put back in a loose bun. She didn't appear menacing. Her posture was relaxed. But something about her presence made the air tighten in my lungs, she said, not revealing anything in her hands. "You don't know me," she remarked quietly, "but I need to tell you something." Her voice wasn't wobbly or unstable. It was steady, serene, almost practiced. Without realizing it, instinct took over and I tensed up. She shook her head and said, "Ma'am, do you need help with something on base? I can call someone for you." I felt uneasy when they said, "No, what you need is help." That's not how people speak. Not in public, not in a canteen where half the patrons are habitually observing one another. Then, with unsettling clarity, she leaned in and locked eyes with me. 3 days from now, she added, something will happen. You'll face a choice. Choose the unexpected. I exhaled slowly, attempting to cover up the shiver that was starting to creep up my back. "I'm not sure what you think, ma'am. You won't comprehend now," she said. "But you will." She got up and left with such ease. It took me a while to see that she had already reached halfway to the door. No last look, no dramatics, just gone. I sat there looking at the place where she had been telling herself that she wasn't feeling well, confused, or lonely. Every day, I have to deal with unpredictability, prophecy, people, weather, and missions. That was on a different plane. I tried, at least, to forget about the experience. The next 2 days flew by, filled with drills, paperwork, weaponry, and physical training. But occasionally her voice came back to me. Pick the unexpected. I had no idea what that meant. I had no desire to find out. I went back to my room early on the 3rd night. Something didn't feel right. Perhaps it was the silence. Perhaps it was the peculiarly pale pink sunset over the training field. Perhaps it was the persistent feeling that something was about to happen. My phone buzzed when I was halfway through putting on a new t-shirt. I disregarded it at first. I thought it was a group communication, perhaps a reminder about the inspection. However, the buzzing ceased and then resumed repeatedly, urgently and persistently that I took a quick look at the screen. Dad is on the go. My heart pounded hard against my chest. My dad never gave me a call. Not on birthdays. Buddes. Not when I graduated. Not even throughout my 9-month deployment. I let it ring once, twice, and 4 times. I answered on the 5th ring. His voice sounded thin, shaky, and older than I could recall. "Is that you, honey?" I froze. Since I was 16, he had not referred to me as honey. "What's going on, Dad?" He gasped for air. "I believe I'm going to die." In an instant, my throat constricted. "You're where?" Have you made a 911 call? No, he muttered. They are not welcome here. You are necessary to me. I need you to come home, please. It has to do with the house. The residence? His breathing became labored. They're attempting to accept it. They're attempting to seize everything. Who is it? However, the line broke into static, followed by quiet. With my heart pounding frigidly, I gazed at my reflection on the black phone screen. Something will happen in 3 days. A decision. I now believe her, even though I didn't at the time. Because that call, shaky, broken, and desperate, made me make the one choice I never imagined having to make. Should I go back to the man who injured me, or should I let him die on his own? She advised me to go with the unexpected. And in that instant, I departed before morning without really knowing why. There was just a rucksack with 2 sets of civilian clothes, my ID, and the dull anguish of knowing I was returning to a life I'd vowed never to return to. There was no ceremony, no dramatic packing, and no sad looks around my quarters. As I crossed the base parking lot, the air was so cold that it stung my face. The pavement was covered in long shadows as the security lights hummed overhead. Unaware that my life had turned upside down the previous evening, a few early risers jogged by and nodded courteously. I couldn't stop thinking about that final phone call. It has to do with the house. They're attempting to seize everything. Who are they? And why did he believe that I, of all people, could make things right? Every notion I had was accompanied by the woman's voice. Choose the unexpected in 3 days. Well, I had made a decision. Or perhaps I had been selected by the option. Mostly businessmen and a few military returning from leave, the flight to Denver was nearly empty. It was a calm route at a peaceful hour. I tried to relax as I sat by the window and watched dawn transform the clouds into streaks of gold and silver. I hadn't returned home in almost 10 years, not since the altercation that caused a complete rift between us. He had referred to the SEALs as a man's world, called me reckless, said I was wasting my life, and declared that he would not emotionally or otherwise support it. I had left, hoping he would follow. He didn't. We remained where we were too arrogant to go, like 2 obstinate mules on opposite sides of a canyon. He believed he was dying now, or perhaps someone wanted him to believe that. The deep fear that had settled in my chest would not go away. The Rocky Mountains loomed in the horizon as the plane touched down. They were blue and jagged, just as I had seen them as a child. Ancient, unyielding, towering. A reminder that no matter how much you run, some things remain the same. After picking up a rental car, I headed south, past familiar highways, faded petrol stations, and the same wayside cafe where my father used to get blueberry pie and black coffee after Sunday church. The sign remained crooked. Something inside of me twisted. On the horizon, my hometown looked like a postcard that had been stored in a drawer for too long. The sun was still standing, although it was faded and a little worn. The small homes were scattered over gently sloping slopes. American flags were displayed on porches. Gravel roads held vintage trucks. In the street, children played basketball. Everything seemed excruciatingly typical, as though my early years had been waiting for me all along. Dad's street was just as I remembered it. Quiet, with oak trees that, in the summer, formed a leafy tunnel and in the winter, a naked skeleton arch. In the late morning light today, they appeared chilly and fragile. His house was in the center of the block, its porch sagging slightly more than I recalled, and its white paint flaking at the corners. In the driveway was a car I didn't recognize. A glossy black SUV that is too new and polished for this area. With my heart pounding, I parked and made my way to the door. My father didn't answer when I knocked. It was Lynn, my stepmother. Her presence marked the start of the rift between us. She had married my father 2 years after my mother's death. We never got along. When her father wasn't being too chilly, there was always something about her that seemed too nice. With a stiff smile that stopped short of her eyes, she opened the door. She said, "Well, who finally decided to show up?" With a wan face. I forced a courteous nod. "Dad, where are you?" "In his chamber." "I'm resting," she said. "However, we must speak before you see him." Her voice was as crisp and brittle as a china plate on the verge of breaking. I said, "I didn't come here to talk to you," and moved past her. But she moved very quickly to block the hallway. "He's weak," she remarked. I looked her in the eye and said, "And fragile. You can't just barge in. Move." Her expression wavered. She moved aside despite her feelings of fear, guilt, and displeasure. Every step I took reverberated loudly on the wooden floor as I moved down the hall. There was a faint scent of my father's aftershave and the same old pine dust throughout the house. But there was something fresh beneath it all. The walls were tense, as if the house were holding its breath. I forced the door of the bedroom open. Dad was thinner than I remembered, and his face and forehead were deeply etched with creases. His hair had turned entirely white. His eyes were the same when they opened, but his respiration was irregular and shallow. And he grinned when he saw me. He smiled, but it was weak, as if he wasn't sure he was supposed to. He muttered, You came." I swallowed the knot in my throat as I sat next to him. "You called." He gave a feeble nod. "I didn't think you would." A long, harsh hush descended. He grabbed my hand. His fingertips felt chilly. "I'm glad you're here," he remarked. I'm scared." His voice broke, and I was affected by that. Something I didn't anticipate because my father had never once acknowledged fear in all the years I knew him. "What's going on?" I inquired. "Lynn mentioned that you were ill." Slowly, he shook his head. "I'm not sure if I'm ill. There are days when I feel lightheaded and days when I'm bewildered. Something seems off, but it comes and goes." "Have you visited a physician?" He said. "I tried, but they said I was exaggerating." He turned to face the door. "My appointments are now handled by Lynn and her boys." My tummy began to feel cold and heavy. "The house too." "When you mentioned that they're attempting to take it, what did you mean?" He took a deep breath. He said, "Tomorrow. They want me to sign a document. There's a meeting, and a lawyer." "Which document?" Fear entered his eyes. "The updated will." My blood became icy. The door creaked open and Lynn entered before I could say anything. Her grin was charming and well-practiced. She asked, "How's the reunion?" "It's best to be brief and straightforward." He gets tired easily. My seal instincts hummed with attention as I stood slowly. There was a serious problem here. With his eyes closed, Dad muttered, "Please don't let them take everything." The woman in the canteen made sense all of a sudden. The warning, the moment, the decision. After 3 days, the actual fight was about to start. That first night, I didn't get any sleep. Not because of the weight of being back under the same roof I'd vowed never to go back to, the jet lag, or the chilly Colorado air seeping through the old window panes. All of my instincts and senses warned me that something wasn't right in this house, so I didn't sleep. It wasn't the rattling old heater or the groaning floors. It was the quiet. The kind of eerie silence that causes the hair on your arms to stand up for no apparent reason. Staring at the ceiling and keeping an ear out for any noise outside my door, I lay awake on the guest bed. Movement, murmurs, footsteps. Nothing was audible to me. However, sometimes the absence of noise poses a greater threat than its presence. When I woke up in the morning, Dad was already awake and shakily drinking water from a plastic cup. I had to calm his hands since they were shaking so much. He gripped my wrist for an excessive amount of time, seemingly worried that I would vanish. "You shouldn't be alone," I whispered softly. "You require assistance. Really helpful." He gave a headshake. "They won't let me." "Who?" asked Lynn, her boys. He glanced back at the door. Every time he did that, I felt a cold thread pull tight inside me. "They say I'm confused," he said. "That I should stop making decisions because I forget stuff. They want me to sign documents pertaining to the house, savings, land behind the barn, and everything else. My chest started to get hot. Anger and instinct for defense. It's the hazardous kind of heat that settles low. "Have you hired the attorney they are bringing tomorrow?" He gave a headshake. "No, they did." I only needed to hear that. More footsteps resounded down the corridor before I could inquire. Like she had just stepped out of a commercial, Lynn emerged at the doorway with a tray of breakfast. Too contrived, too polished, too dazzling. She chirped, "I made oatmeal. Today, we must all maintain our strength." The sight of her made Dad tense. A tiny, barely noticeable wince. I witnessed it. She noticed that I had noticed it. Her smile quivered like a thread that had been pulled. Before she could enter the room, I removed the platter from her grasp. Thank you. Eat in private, then. She put on another smile when her eyes narrowed slightly. Family time, of course. Without saying anything more, she departed, and I became aware of something she detested, my presence. Dad was so exhausted after eating that he fell asleep soon and was carried beneath like a tide. I wrapped the blanket around him and moved into the corridor. Low conversations and the sound of cutlery clattering emanated from the kitchen. I did what I was told. Lynn and her two sons, Trevor and Miles, who are both in their mid-20s and were raised to believe they were entitled to what others had worked for, were seated at the table. They gazed at me in the same manner that residents of small towns gaze at strangers. However, I was once the insider. Good morning, I said. Smirking, Trevor reclined in his chair. The wayward daughter then makes a comeback. Miles whispered. Appears the day before the will is altered. Common. I disregarded the jab. What is the purpose of tomorrow's appointment with the attorney? Lynn gave a hasty response. It is really a formality. I said, funny. Dad appears afraid of it. She made herself laugh. He's been puzzled lately. I see. He loses track of stuff. Makes things up. You are aware of the aging process of the mind. I firmly said, no. I'm not sure. He was clear enough to give me a call. Like scared birds, their gaze darted between each other. That was not what they had anticipated. What are you trying to say? Leaning forward, Trevor inquired. My point is that I promised to attend the meeting tomorrow and to have a private conversation with the attorney beforehand. Lynn's grin vanished. You are unable to. This is a family issue. I'm related. The silent tension that precedes a storm thickened the room. At last, Lynn's voice became sharp at the edges. It's been years since you were here. You have no idea what's best for him. And yet I said softly, he called me, not you. Her expression went cold. That struck a chord. I took a step back toward the corridor. The meeting tomorrow won't go as planned. I turned and saw Miles talking to his brother in a whisper. Then Trevor's angry, low voice. Everything will be ruined by her. I stayed near Dad for the remainder of the day, keeping an eye out for any indications of anxiety, perplexity, or concern. And it became more apparent the more I saw. His mind wasn't the issue. It was those in his immediate vicinity. Lynn would go over and cry, "Oh no, you're too weak. Lie down," whenever he attempted to sit up. "Don't strain yourself, old man," Miles would tell him as he attempted to walk to the kitchen. "You'll stumble." The message was conveyed in every conversation they spoke with him. You have no power. You're not competent. You're slipping. It was subtle enough for outsiders to overlook, but I had witnessed this previously in cases of domestic violence in families abroad, when one person gradually eroded the confidence of another until they thought they couldn't survive without the abuser. I realized by late afternoon that I needed more details. Documents, facts, and evidence of manipulation. I then sneaked into Lynn's office, the tiny space by the laundry, after she left to perform errands. I chose it because she kept the door locked. There was a locked drawer, unread mail, and piles of paperwork within. When I forced it open, I discovered bank transfers that made my stomach drop, financial documents, modifications to Dad's doctor's appointments, and a folder called New Will Draft. Thousands of cash were transferred to Trevor's and Miles's accounts. Dad never signed any insurance documents. And handwritten comments in Lynn's tidy handwriting. Persuade him to include boys. Bring up memory issues. Mild cognitive deterioration, the doctor remarked. Make use of this. Make use of this. Not assist him. Make use of it. It stung how tightly my jaw was clamped. There was no confusion here. This wasn't maturing naturally. This was deliberate, targeted manipulation. A concerted effort to weaken, isolate, and exhaust my father. I snapped photos of everything. And for the first time since I got here, I didn't feel confused or uneasy. I had a sense of purpose. I sat next to Dad when he slept later that night. For once, he appeared at ease, breathing evenly and slowly. In one way or another, everything would be different tomorrow. The truth, the will, the meeting and the attorney. The woman in the canteen, her abrupt presence, and her exact warning came to mind. I still had no idea who she was, how she found out, or why I trusted her. However, I came to a realization as I watched my father sleep, weak, exhausted, and more human than I had ever allowed myself to recall. The surprising decision had nothing to do with the future. It has to do with confronting the past. And I would deal with everything tomorrow. Outside the guest room window, the sky was still a deep navy blue when I woke up before morning. In the early light of the street lamp, a thin line of frost clung to the glass, glowing dimly. Colorado mornings were crisp, sharp, and almost therapeutic. I grounded myself by inhaling it was the day. The lawyer, the reading of the will, the culmination of it all. Silently, I put on jeans and a simple pullover, pulled my hair back. I was dressed like any other daughter returning home to assist her father, not in my uniform or SEAL gear. But it was all training, the way I handled myself, the methodical steps, the mental clarity. Like a ghost familiar with every floorboard, I walked silently through the hallway. Today, the home had a strange vibe. It was anxious but also anticipating, as if it knew what was about to happen. Dad was awake as I walked into his room, gazing up at the ceiling with a look I hadn't seen since I was a kid. The expression of a guy about to take a blow. "Morning," I responded softly. He forced a smile as he turned his head. "You're up early." "So are you," he sighed. "Unable to fall asleep. I keep thinking about everything." I sat next to him and put my hand on his shoulder. "Listen to me, Dad. In Lynn's office, I discovered bank transfers and a draft of the new will. They have been pressuring and controlling you. You are not to blame for this." He swallowed, his eyes moist. "I thought I was going crazy." I firmly answered, "You're not. They're controlling you." Weak but desperate, his fingers clutched my hand. "What will we do?" "We're going to tell the truth when we enter." We were interrupted by a gentle knock. Through the door, Lynn's voice drifted. "A sharp and sugary breakfast in 5 minutes." Dad winced. I learned what I needed to know from that minuscule, hardly perceptible movement. I leaned in. "Keep your cool today, Dad. Talk as little as you can. I'll take care of the rest." With a flash of relief in his weary eyes, he nodded. The tension in the kitchen was a living thing. Lynn lingered over the stove, agitating the porridge too vigorously. Both Miles and Trevor attempted, but failed, to appear casual as they sat at the table. Miles quickly tapped his foot. Trevor repeatedly cracked his knuckles. All three of them froze for a moment when I intervened. Then the show started. "Well, good morning," Lynn responded with a smile. "Big day today," I said as I sat down across from the boys. "Sure is," Trevor grinned. "Hope you're not planning to make trouble." "Why would I do that?" I gave a fair response. "This is all a formality, after all." "You said that, didn't you?" Miles shifted uneasily. With fiery eyes that she hastily attempted to soothe, Lynn moved away from the stove. "You know, sweetheart, this will reading has been planned for months. Your father has been clear about what he wants." "Oh, I have no doubt he's been coached," I responded gently. For a brief moment, her face turned pale, allowing me to make sure she understood exactly what I meant. The doorbell rang at 10 o'clock. Dad was sitting in his living room armchair, wrapped in a blanket, clearly anxious. While Lynn hurried to answer the door, frantically brushing her hair, I assisted him in sitting up straight. A man in his early 50s walked confidently in a polished suit with a leather bag. He was a lawyer named James Welker, and he had the demeanor of a guy accustomed to dealing with family problems. "Good morning," he remarked, giving everyone a handshake. "Shall we begin?" Dad was seated on the sofa, the lawyer was in the armchair, Lynn and her sons were perched on the love seat like vultures, and I was standing by the fireplace with my arms folded, watching everything. Welker opened his briefcase and cleared his throat. "We're here to complete the revised will, as far as I can tell." "Yes," Lynn chirped. "Everyone has agreed." I moved to the front. "We haven't, in fact." Welker gave me a glance. I answered, "And you are his daughter. And before he signs anything, I would like to ask him a few questions." Lynn let out a short breath. This is not required. Welker really made a courteous interruption. It makes great sense. She closed her mouth abruptly. I took a folder out of my backpack and gave it to him. These are copies of the money transfers from my father's account throughout the previous 14 months. He didn't authorize any. I pointed to the following batch of documents, which included missing doctor's appointments that he allegedly cancelled despite the handwriting not being his. I also put up the last sheet, which was a draft of the new will that had been discovered locked in a drawer. Welker's visage hardened as he slowly turned the pages of the document. The color faded from Lynn's face. Trevor moved forward. "Oh crap," Miles muttered to himself. Dad gave me a heartbroken and relieved face. Welker looked to the step-parents. "Was this draft prepared by any of you?" Lynn stumbled. "I mean, we were assisting him. He forgets that he is perplexed." I responded, "He's not." "But you've been persuading him that he is for months." "This is absurd," Trevor yelled. "After years away, she barges in, believing she knows what's going on. She is attempting to take what is rightfully ours." "What do you own?" I repeated. "This house employed my father for 40 years. In less than 3, you moved in." Miles clenched his fists and got to his feet. "Do you really believe that you can enter this place and destroy everything?" He glared at me as I moved ahead. "Nothing is going to be ruined by me. I'm coming to put an end to the destruction you've already brought about." Welker held up a hand. "That's sufficient. I am unable to sign the will today in good faith in light of these documents. An investigation is necessary for this." Lynn burst out. "That is not something you can do. We've been waiting for months." "You've been waiting." I gave her a correction. Dad didn't. Welker closed his briefcase with a snap. "In addition to proposing a wellness evaluation for Mr. Hartman in light of the possible indications of financial coercion, I am postponing any amendments to the will until further notice." Relief made Dad's breath tremble. Trevor struck the wall with his hand. "Our lives are being ruined by you." I looked him in the eye. "No, I'm trying to save my dad's." And I could see it clearly for the first time since coming that it was not the will that was causing the fear in their eyes. It has to do with losing control. Dad collapsed onto the couch, shaking, after the lawyer had departed. I knelt next to him. "It's over," I said. He nodded and started crying. "They can't force you anymore." I thought no one would believe me. "I believe you," I replied. He held my hand and said, "I always did. I was just too far away to see it." The step-family behind us withdrew to the kitchen and muttered angrily, "Thank you, sweetheart." I was unconcerned. They were no longer in charge. Their scheme was falling apart. My father appeared secure for the first time in years. And I came to a realization. I had not been alerted to danger by the woman in the canteen. She had forewarned me about fate. After the lawyer left, the house felt different. It changed as if the center of gravity had shifted, although it wasn't precisely safer. The walls no longer seemed to be bending in Lynn's and her son's direction. They were aware that they were not in charge of the ship. The fear beneath their skin was palpable. Like an animal in a cage, Trevor paced the corridor. Miles continued to look at me as though I might immediately arrest him. And Lynn was breaking apart in tiny, fragile ways. However, Dad's breathing sounded quiet for the first time in months, if not years. That night, I stayed near him. A lamp glowed softly next to us as we sat together in the living room. With trembling hands, he took a sip of tea. He murmured softly, almost ashamed, as the fireplace clicked softly in the background. He said, "I didn't want to bother you. Didn't want you to think I was weak." "You're not weak," I answered. Before he could brush it away, a tear trickled down his cheek. "They repeatedly stated that. You're losing track of stuff. You don't understand. You require assistance in every way." I began to trust them. The spirit is bruised by emotional assault, not the skin. It hurt more than I anticipated to see my father's bruise. I said, "You're not confused, Dad. That's what they wanted you to believe." He gave a feeble nod. I had no idea how to put an end to it. Then allow me to halt it. He exhaled deeply, seemingly letting go of months' worth of anxiety. The home stirred with an odd mixture of expectation and fear the following morning. The stepfamily insisted on meeting even though the official will reading with the attorney had been postponed until the investigation was complete. Lynn stiffly stated, "We need to clarify future decisions," during breakfast. Trevor said, "We're not just stepping aside because you showed up." I didn't answer. They were beginning to show signs of desperation. They assembled in the living room around 10 o'clock, all four of them on one side as if they were getting ready for combat. Dad took a blanket-covered seat next to me on the couch. He appeared pallid but vigilant. Lynn put her well-groomed hands together and murmured, "Let's start." I arched an eyebrow. Begin what? Pushing her chin forward, she talked about how things would be managed until the lawyer had completed his review. Dad moved next to me, his face showing signs of pain. Trevor bent over. "We believe it would be best if Dad gave us temporary authority. Until the probe is resolved, that is." I gazed at them. Then I let out a quiet, sincere laugh of disbelief. "I'm going to let you walk him into another trap," I stated gently. Lynn's forced grin broke. "It's not a trap. We're simply continuing what we've been doing. Managing his medications, his appointments, his finances." "You mean mismanaging?" Her nostrils flared. Trevor pointed a finger at me. "You're attempting to absorb everything. This is not even where you reside." I calmly met his stare. "No, this is not where I reside. However, the only important person in this house extended an invitation for me to return." Miles laughed bitterly. "Practical. He hardly remembers what he said the day before." Dad raised his chin and stood up tall. He firmly answered, "That's not true. I can recall every detail." There was silence in the room. Since coming back, I had never heard such strength in his voice. And I was as shocked as the rest of us. "I know what's been happening," Dad went on. "I know how you've talked to me, how you've made decisions without me, and I know who called me when I needed help." Trevor started to speak, but Dad held out a shaking hand. "No, I'm speaking." That soft voice had enough authority to silence the whole room. "I may be old," he remarked. "However, I'm neither confused nor foolish. The only thing I did wrong was to put my trust in individuals who didn't want me for who I am." Lynn's voice fell to a beseeching whisper as her face crumbled. "We just wanted to assist you, sweetie." Dad interrupted her once more. "Lynn, you wanted control? Let's stop lying." She froze. A wall she never anticipated was reached after a lifetime of manipulation. Then I intervened, composed, steady, and in charge. I stated that no temporary authority will be signed. No paperwork, no modifications. Until the investigation is over, everything is frozen. Trevor's jaw tightened. "This is not something you can do." I said, "I'm not doing anything." Dad is at last speaking up for himself, and the law is. Lynn's gaze flitted to the study, where she kept her documents secured. Her expression flashed with a terrified thought. What was it that she discovered? What is she aware of? Is it too late now? "The lawyer will return next week," I went on. "Dad will be evaluated by a physician, and going forward, all medical appointments and financial decisions will be recorded, monitored, and authorized by an impartial third party." Miles sneered. "You're acting like we're criminals." I kept my eyes fixed on it. "Then you shouldn't be concerned." Nobody said anything. It felt like the air could cut. Lynn abruptly jumped up and put a hand to her forehead. "This is ridiculous." I finished speaking. She shuddered as she moved near the hallway shoulders. I couldn't tell if it was dread or rage. Her sons trailed behind, whispering to one another. I did, however, say one final word before they vanished. A silent warning intended only for her. "Don't try anything today." She froze just for a heartbeat, then walked away. When they were gone, Dad exhaled deeply and tremblingly. "I didn't think I had the strength to face them," he said. "You did," I said softly. "All you needed was someone to support you." He swallowed, eyes gleaming. "I apologize for the way I handled you. For everything." I gave his hand a squeeze. "Let's discuss that." "Not right now." We only keep you safe today. His tone became softer. I'm happy you arrived. There was nothing else he could have said, but those 4 words felt more important and weighty. I sat there for a while, taking in the house's soft hum. A corrupted, distorted, and controlled home. However, it seemed to be breathing once more. There would be further difficulties, inquiries, medical assessments, and legal follow-ups tomorrow. However, the worst was now behind us. The individuals who had previously represented my father were no longer in a position of authority because the truth was now known. The canteen woman had been correct. Everything had changed in 3 days, and the unanticipated decision had brought me to this room where my father was speaking again. And there was much more that needed to be healed. After the altercation, the home was hollow, as if the walls themselves were stunned, rather than serene. With his blanket pulled snugly around him, Dad sat in his armchair near the window and gazed out at the oak tree. I simply observed his breathing and the gentle rise and fall of his chest for a considerable amount of time. In Section 5, he had rediscovered his voice. He needed strength now. I took a seat next to him. You did well today. His eyes were far away as he slowly nodded. I didn't feel courageous. I was exhausted. I added softly, you were brave. You confronted those who had been undermining you for months. It requires more bravery than anything I've ever done. He gave a feeble laugh. As a Navy SEAL, you are. I'm very sure you've taken more daring actions. I muttered, not like this. I really did mean it. Older Americans are all too familiar with a certain kind of bravery. The bravery to confront guilt, regret, and the anxiety of passing away with unresolved business. That is a battlefield unto itself. Dad sighed, his fingers playing with his blanket's corner. He said, I have to tell you something. The weight of something long overdue was in his voice. I prepared myself. He said, I wasn't fair to you. When your mother died, I was upset. Angry at myself, angry at the world. You too reminded me of her. Your tenacity, your strength, and the way you move through spaces as if you were on a mission. My throat constricted. He muttered, I didn't know how to deal with my grief. I therefore shoved you away. I told myself that my decision to join the military was a mistake. I told myself that I wasn't necessary. And you believed it? Softly, I said. With tears welling up in his eyes, he nodded. I thought if I cut you off, the pain would be easier. It wasn't, I muttered. No, he shook his head. It wasn't. We sat in a long healing stillness, the kind that allows light to pass through ancient walls. Then he said something in a whisper that struck a deeper chord than everything else that day. I don't want to pass away while you despise me. I grabbed his hand. You are not hated by me. He gave me a look that suggested he didn't trust me. I said, I was hurt. But no hate, you're my dad. His face lit up with relief as he closed his eyes. He exhaled, thank you. I went into the backyard a few hours later to get some fresh air. The sharpness felt wonderful and grounded, yet the chilly air cut my cheeks. I could see the barn from the porch, the tall grass waving along the fence line that my father used to repair every spring. Flashes of memories appeared. My father is teaching me how to ride a bike. From the porch, Mom is waving. Laughter reverberates from the trees during Sunday picnics. The sliding door opened before sorrow shattered everything behind me. With a low, fragile voice, Lynn emerged. We must speak. I did not approach, but I did turn. What are your desires? She folded her arms. Our family is being ruined by you. I nearly burst out laughing. Before you ever arrived, Dad, I and our family were a family. She yelled, that's not fair. I was fond of him. I answered, no, you controlled him. Her mouth tightened. You have no idea what it's like to look after an elderly man. He forgets things. His perplexity, his tenacity. I said, he's not confused. He was alone. She gave me a scathing look. Fear, not hatred. He was in need of someone. I was the one who stayed. I said, you stayed because the house is paid off. Since the expenses are covered by his pension. Because you enjoyed the fact that he gave you the reins. Her mouth quivered. Do you believe that everything is changed by your return? You'll depart once more. Every time you depart. It made sense now. Money was not the source of her despair. Power was at issue. The only power she had ever possessed. I let out a slow breath. Lynn, I'm not here to take anything from you. All I want is for Dad to make the choices he truly desires. She said, that's not how he works. He needs a mentor. No, imutarat. Someone has to be in charge of you. She gave a blink. Even she was surprised when a single tear came out. I tried, she muttered. I did, in fact. She appeared diminutive, depressed, and human for the first time. However, regret does not make abuse go away. It simply applies a softer filter. Now what will happen? Silently, she inquired. I stated that was up to you. The will, however, is frozen. Dad will now have medical protection, and the probe will proceed. With a trembling nod, she withdrew inside without saying anything else. After learning that Dad wasn't doing well, 2 elderly neighbors dropped by in the afternoon. They brought stories and soup, the kind of tales that are passed down through American small towns like family treasures. Your father's a good man, remarked Mr. Dalton, Dad's fishing partner from 30 years ago, as he sat at the kitchen table. I simply lost my way for a bit. Mrs. Klein gave me a shoulder pat. Thank you, sweetheart, for returning home. You were necessary to him. And something in me that military roughness had never entirely obliterated was warmed by those straightforward, everyday, traditional, and incredibly compassionate words. I assisted Dad in getting into bed later that night. He appeared weary yet lighter, as though some unseen burden had been removed from his back. He said, "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "That woman," he said. "The one you told me about in the canteen. What did she look like?" I said, describing her serene strength, calm gaze, and gray hair. My heart halted. Dad's breath hitched. That sounds like your mother. I had to swallow hard every time life became difficult or we had to make a difficult choice. She used to say that he went on, choose the unexpected. He shook his head and gave a small smile, saying, That's impossible, Dad. Even when she wasn't around, she always managed to support you when you most needed it. It seemed as though someone else was standing next to us since the space was brighter and warmer. I placed the blanket beneath his chin. Get some rest. He gave my hand a squeeze. He said, I'm proud of you. I had been waiting half my life to hear those words. I extinguished the light and entered the corridor. The home was silent once more, yet it wasn't empty or scared. The surprise judgment wasn't based on the law. There was no conflict. Wasn't retaliation. It was family, forgiveness, compassion, and for the first time in years, I felt at home. I had changed, not the house. The following morning, the living room rug's edges turned gold as sunshine gently streamed over it. With a blanket covering his lap and an expression I hadn't seen in years, Dad was already awake and sat in his recliner, gazing out the window. Calm, steady clarity. A man recovering fragments of himself. He remarked, You slept on the couch again, as soon as I entered. I gave a shrug. I wanted to be close in case you needed something. He laughed. I didn't ask for what I needed for 8 years. I believe I can manage one night by myself. This time, there was humility and a kinder undertone in his voice instead of resentment. I sat next to him and let the quiet of the morning settle between us. A bird pecked at phantom crumbs as it hopped along the railing outside. Dad watched it as he did when I was a child, fascinated by commonplace details. Your mother loved mornings like this, he abruptly remarked. Gentle, peaceful, as if the world had stopped. This time, the familiar agony in my chest was less intense. I recall. He gave a nod. You would make her proud. I was unaware that I had been longing for those words, yet they still felt like a warm weight. The home was more active by lunchtime than it had been in months. The social worker showed up. First, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard full of assessments and gentle eyes. The health department nurse then arrived with medical paperwork, a stethoscope and tactful expertise. With her arms crossed, Lynn lingered in the hallway, avoiding eye contact. With their doors locked, Her sons remained in their room, muttering frantically. The kind of terror that arises when repercussions finally arrive. It took over 2 hours to complete the evaluations. Dad took his time answering each question, but he was able to recollect individuals, dates, events, drugs, the time of his most recent appointment, and even the color of the nurse's scrubs from 3 weeks prior. The social worker put a comforting hand on his shoulder after she was done. "Mr. Hartman, you're doing great. Better than a lot of males your age. You don't have cognitive impairment. You have the ability to make your own choices." Dad let out a trembling sigh of relief. Lynn's expression darkened. "This is ridiculous," Trevor whispered to himself. However, the truth had been declared, and truth has the power to dispel shadows. Dad asked to spend some time outside after the experts had left. I put him in a chair on the porch and covered him with a heavier coat. The light tempered the cool edge of the October breeze enough to make the moment agreeable. "This house feels different today," he stated. "Since you are once again in charge." He tugged at the corner of his mouth and nodded with a slight smile. The screen door behind us creaked open a few minutes later. With her arms clenched in a protective stance, Lynn went outdoors. She said, "Can I speak to you both?" Her voice was not as crisp as normal. She appeared smaller, as if she had spent more time battling for control than gaining people's trust. Dad gave a nod. "Go ahead." She inhaled tremblingly. "I am aware that you consider me to be the antagonist. I may be, but I didn't do all you believe." I closed my eyes for a moment, getting ready to make excuses. I said, "You isolated him. You were in charge of his funds, appointments, and choices. That isn't taking care of someone. That is mistreatment." She muttered, "I didn't start out that way. I promise I didn't. Your father was devastated by the loss of your mother. I made an effort to close the gaps. I made an effort to assist him, but he began to forget small details." I answered softly, "He wasn't forgetting. He was in mourning." She took a swallow. "I took over because I had no idea how to assist him. And my fear of losing everything grew as I took more." Dad gave her a silent, hurt look. "Lynn, you ought to have spoken to me rather than speaking on my behalf." She started to cry. "I apologize. I really am. It was insufficient. It was a beginning, but it didn't reverse the damage." Dad sighed. "I have no desire to punish you. I don't want to despise you, but things are about to alter drastically." She gave a nod. "I get it." And he added quietly, "The boys and you will have to vacate. Soon, but not today or tomorrow." She slumped her shoulders. "Part acceptance, part defeat." She answered, "I'll respect that. I apologize to you both as well." Wiping her tears, she turned and went back inside. With a weary sigh, Dad leaned back. "It was more difficult than I anticipated. I remarked that most worthwhile things are." He gave a feeble laugh. "You have your mother's voice." Warmth began to slowly permeate me as a result. Dad and I looked through old boxes in the attic, dusty photo albums, handwritten notes, faded Christmas ornaments, and medals he'd hidden away decades ago, as day turned into evening. We discovered a stack of letters Dad had written during his early years with Lynn that he never sent, laughed about my terrible middle school hairdo, and recalled my mother's favorite dishes. Confusion, dread, desire, and remorse dominated the majority. One box has a little wooden enclosure toward the bottom. Dad carefully opened it. There was a gold locket within. "My mom's." He handed it to me. "One day, she hoped you might have this." Tears stung the corners of my eyes as I traced the metal's smooth contour. I muttered, "Thank you." Dad whispered, "She loved you. She would also be appreciative that you returned home." He hesitated. "So am I." That night, Dad fell asleep in his recliner while we watched an old western, one he used to play every Sunday after church. I draped a blanket over him and turned down the lights. Before heading to the guest room, I strolled onto the porch one last time. The yard was still, the sky was full of stars, and for a split second, I sensed a presence that was neither weird nor unsettling, but rather warm, like a mother watching her child come home. I shut my eyes. I muttered, "Thank you," into the chilly night air. The investigation proceeded in the days that followed. Lynn consented to depart amicably. Dad regained his dignity, strength, and independence. Our connection was restored. One memory at a time, one interaction. Choosing the unexpected, as that enigmatic woman had advised, changed everything. Revenge had brought me home, but forgiveness kept me there. Dad gave me a tight, genuine hug before I left for my base assignment once more. "Come home more often," he said. "Yes, I will. And keep in contact. I swear. And let your commanding officer know that your father is pleased with you," he continued, grinning. I grinned. I believe he is already aware. Perhaps this story serves as a reminder that healing is possible even after years. If you've ever experienced something similar, had to decide between forgiveness and fury, or return to a room full of old wounds, post your opinions or a personal narrative below. If this resonated with you, please think about subscribing so you may follow us for more tales of resiliency, atonement, and second chances.